Pattern Effects is the latest product from ColorLogic, and it's a set of dynamic patterns that can be applied to your metallic designs using the Process Metallic color system. So first of all, I'd like to just go through the actual user manual, and we do recommend that you read the user manual because it will explain about everything about how to design with the patterns, how to scale or rotate, and do many other things. So let's just take a quick look at the indexing. So we have a guide to install and licensing the product, how to load the pattern into Illustrator, how you apply those patterns to different types of solid colors. We're going to cover patterns on gradients. Then there's 3 different ways in how to scale a pattern. So for example, you can scale the item but not the pattern. So for example, this shape here was scaled up but the pattern was retained the same size. We have the option to take a pattern and the item and scale both of them up. And then we have the option to just scale the pattern and not the item. And again, what we do here is we actually show how this is all done with all the settings, so you can just go through and click the settings in Illustrator. The same thing applies with rotating. You can either rotate the pattern, rotate the shape, or rotate the pattern and the shape. Example applications and how this can be used. Realistically, anything that you're designing with the ColorLogic system, you can embed these patterns into. Here are just a few examples from templates such as business cards, packaging, greeting cards, anything where you want to try and bring to life a flat or dull panel that gives your print something a little bit extra that grabs the attention of the viewer. When we are saving our files to view inside the FX viewer, it's important to read this section in the manual because it explains about the settings you need for saving your PDF file, which basically needs to be a 1.3 compatible. That will then honour the overprints and transparency testings that are applied inside these palettes. If you don't do it, then you'll get this kind of weird looking design here. This image on the left shows how it should look. So do take care to read the information. You can of course contact us for support at our usual support lines, and we cover all that inside the back of the manual. The user guide also has a section called printable patterns, and these are each of the patterns in each volume, and they've been laid out so you can actually print these pages off. So let's just take a look. If we click on pattern number 1, it will show you what the pattern is as a metallic, and its dimensional, watermark, watermark effects plus equivalents, and then also we have the pattern as an emboss and a varnish. So you can either use one of these or you can combine them. For example, you might want a metallic element with an emboss, or you might want a dimensional effect with a varnish. So it's just about how you create those files. And each page is a different pattern. So all you have to do, print those out. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is go right into teaching you how to use this. But first of all, I want to just explain about what each of the effects are. So I've taken one of the patterns from the system, and I've done these visualizations here. I actually did these visuals using the ESCO Studio Visualizer, which allows me to simulate embossing and varnishing and different effects. So let's start out with one at the top here, the metallic. So the pattern is this little funny shape, and the pattern is made metallic. Dimensional effect is the opposite of the metallic. It actually punches out the metallic out of a metallic element, which creates this light changing element, which for those familiar with the ColorLogic system, it creates this color shifting change from a lighter to a darker hue. Watermark effects is the ability to hide the pattern within inside a metallic area. So for example, this is a square of metallic with the pattern embedded. So when you move the print, it will visually appear and disappear. Now an important thing is to make all these effects happen correctly, you do need to make sure your tone curves for your spot color is correct, because we are using tints of either the silver or tints of the white ink. So if you don't have your dot gain curve correct, these effects won't work correctly. Watermark effects plus, this is the ability to apply the pattern to any coloured area, and it creates like a subliminal watermark. So it doesn't have to be inside a metallic area like the watermark effects one up here. It can be on any colour. We then have the pattern as an emboss, which as the name suggests, it's an emboss plate. That could be something like a micro emboss where you're creating a lot of fine details. And then we have the varnish. So each one has its individual effect. So let's show you how this works. First of all, once you've installed the pattern effects library, you go to the window menu, swatch libraries and then locate the ColorLogic pattern effects and the particular volume that you've actually purchased. For now we've just launched volume 1, so that's all you'll see in the list, but if you came back in 6 months time there might be volumes 2 and 3 available. So click on that and it's going to bring up a palette. Now I do recommend that you change the palette settings to persistent, which basically means that it will load every time you open Illustrator. If that's not checked, then you'll have to keep going into your window and reload it up. Now working with this thing here, we've got all of the patterns in our list. Let me just extend that out a little bit. Each one's got a name. Now you can, if you wish, isolate those down. So for example, if I want to work with pattern number 7, we just type in 007 and it'll bring up all the patterns for number 7. So it has its dimensional, the watermark and embossing and everything else already in there. So it's just a tidy way to be able to work with your files. And clicking on the button there will get rid of it. So let's start out, let's work with, let's do something quite simple. Let's do a rectangle or square in this case. And I'm going to give it a colour from the ColorLogic library. So we do recommend you use the colours from the ColorLogic system because they are predefined and you know what they're going to look like. So let's choose like number 70 for example. Okay, so at the moment we've made the design CMYK, so let's just turn off all our separations. There's nothing else there but the CMYK. What I have to do now is duplicate that box. So there are different ways you can do it. You can copy and paste in place. I'm just going to move it and make a copy. So I'll just move that out of the way so you can see we have 2 items. The reason we're doing is this, we need to put the pattern on top of the vector element. So we now go to our pattern and let's do that one as metallic. So it's applied the pattern, it's done the metallic effect and it's all there and done inside for you. So really quite easy to apply that, and you can see by moving it out of the way how it's applied over the top. If I want to change that to something else, I can go in and choose a different pattern and it will automatically do that pattern for me. Or maybe I want to change the effect, so maybe I want it to be a dimensional effect, or maybe it's an emboss. So it's just a case of click on whichever one you want and it will apply those effects for you. So that's the basics behind how to apply it on top of a solid colour. Now we could also apply this to a gradient. So let's just again keep this quite simple. We'll pick a couple of colours from our library. So let's go with this lilac-y kind of colour and something else visually quite disgusting. Let's go with this green. Okay, so we've chosen 2 colours. We select it, we make a duplicate again. We go to our pattern, we apply what we want to apply. So now we've got that metallic pattern going over a gradient. Or maybe again we want to change that to maybe the dimensional effect. And that way you're actually creating these complex designs just by simple clicking. Now if we turn off the separations, let's have a look at the ColorLogic separation. So what you can see here, if we try and work this out, if you were printing this with silver ink, then the silver is your silver ink and the white's the white paper. Now if you were printing this onto say a digital press or a device that's capable of printing onto a metallic silver substrate, then the silver will be the silver substrate and the white will be your white ink mask. But this is all done automatically as you're designing. You don't have to worry about it with the ColorLogic system. So let's just let's do some different testing here. So at the moment we've got number 3 dimensional effect. I'm just going to turn off the 4 colour so you can see this change. Now if I then change that to number 3 metallic, notice how the pattern is automatically changing and the metallic separation is automatically changing. Now can you imagine having to try and do white ink masking on these different areas? So if I decided to print this onto a metallic silver substrate, I would have to create these white knockout masks. But with our system, you just click and apply the effect and it's automatic. So it's going to save a lot of time in the studio creating these effects. Okay, so let's go and try something else now. Let's do something a little bit more creative. Let's do a different shape. I'll give it a colour and we're going to duplicate it and we're going to apply a pattern to that. Okay, so we've got our file. Now we can scale this as well. So I'm going to select both of these items and I'm going to copy it over here so you can see what I'm going to do. Right, we're going to scale just the item. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale, select both items, so that's the pattern and the vector graphic, the green graphic, and I'm going to go to my scale tool, and let's do it at 150%. Okay, so by having these two selected here, so that we're scaling transforming the object, but we've got this one unticked, so we're not going to scale the pattern. So as you can see here, the item changes, but the pattern doesn't. So if I was to manually scale this down, you can see how the pattern always stays where it is. It makes no difference to what size I make the pattern, so it's a seamless, scalable pattern. Now, what we could also do, and again these are all covered in the user manual, we could scale just the pattern. Now if we only want to scale the pattern, you only want to pick up the pattern layer. Okay, so again we're going to our scale. This time I'm going to turn off the transform objects and keep on the transform pattern. So now you can see that the shape has stayed the same size, but the pattern has increased in size. Okay. Okay, so that's scaling the pattern. Oh, sorry, scaling the size. Let me get this one right. This one is scaling the pattern and keeping the item the same. The previous one that we did was scaling the item and keeping the pattern the same, and then the other option that I'll show you is to scale both of them. And this is why using the user manual will actually show you step by step on how to do this. So we need to select both of them and it will show you the settings. So this time we've got both selected. We're transforming the object and the pattern. So you can see we've scaled the size of the pattern and the item at the same time. Okay, so next let's keep it with the same design. And I'm going to copy that. This time we're going to do rotations. So I'm going to only rotate the shape. I don't want to rotate the pattern. So select both items. I'll go to my rotate tool and it's the same kind of process. We're going to transform the object by 45 degrees, but the pattern stays the same. Move these up here. You can see the difference. Make a copy of that. So this time we're going to select just the pattern and we're going to transform the pattern but not the object, so you can see there's a difference in the pattern already. So by doing this you can actually create some even more interesting effects away from the patterns, because this pattern visually looks different to this one now just by rotating it. So that's a clever thing with patterns, is that you're not restricted to just having one set item. You can do some crazy things with them. The next one would be to rotate, get this one right, so I'll make another copy down here, copy that across, and this time select both of them and then we're going to transform them both. So we've rotated the item and the pattern. And then of course you could go in and you could scale this as well and say, okay, I want to now rotate, scale. So it's fully editable, fully seamless, and create some amazing effects. Okay, so that's the basics behind how they work. So now let's close this down. Let's go into a piece of artwork. So in this artwork here, we've got, I've already done the robot. I've done a bespoke pattern in there that I've created completely different. And then we've got a pattern that I embedded into this sticker that will be on the top. I use the pattern in the outer frame. It's just to give it a little something extra that can make it a little bit more complex, a little bit harder to reproduce. And ultimately, we like thinking about these effects for a way for like a counterfeiting technology. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So first of all, let's select these gradient panels. So I'm going to select the same fill. So I'm now selecting all those panels. I'm going to duplicate them. I'm going to go to my palettes and choose something that I want from my list. So let's go for something kind of technically looking. Okay, that will do. Again, you could go in here and put in whatever you want. So for example, it could be this pattern. Let's keep with that one actually, it's a little bit larger. Okay, so I've applied my pattern. It's gone across all the panels that I want it to be applied to. I didn't put it in the background panel here because I don't want it interfering with text. I'd always recommend putting like a frame, like I've done here, around the wording so that the pattern doesn't always butt right up to your text. You've got to think about how this is going to interact with your design. So very quickly, very easily, we've added the effects in there. Okay, so now when we look at our separation, that is our silver ink separation printed on white paper. Or if you're doing this on metallized substrate, the silver is the silver substrate, the white will be the white ink. So if you're doing this on metallized materials, can you imagine how long it would take you to do the white ink masking on this design? And as you can see with ours, it's done in seconds. Okay, so from there, we're going to save the file. I'm going to do this as a PDF because I want to be able to visualize it in the FX viewer. Now this is very important here. When you're saving your file for using in the FX viewer with these patterns, we would recommend you saving it as a PDFX3, and that has down here in the advanced settings the overprint and transparency flattener. So it'll preserve the overprints and flatten all those transparency overlays. If you don't do that, it won't work correctly. So let me show you what will happen if you don't do it. So I'm just going to save the first one as a press quality. I'm going to save that file, and now I'm going to save another one at the correct settings. Add that one in there. This time we do that as PDFX3. Save the file. Okay, so we have the two PDF files we created. So first let's show you what happens if you don't have the correct settings in your FX viewer. So it's going to launch the FX viewer, and in the background it's going to process that art file into a 3D rendered environment. For those familiar with the FX viewer, it's a great tool to be able to visualize your effects in both metallic and foil printing. So you'll see straight away that our design has not worked. The patterns don't seem to be coming out correctly. That's because of the way they're created for our system. If you don't have the correct settings in your PDF, it will not work. So let's drop that one and throw that one in the bin, and let's take the same file that we saved with the correct PDF settings, and when it's rendered the file you will see that we'll be able to see our pattern in the background. It takes a few moments to render it because it is actually ripping in the background. So from here I'm going to visualize, in this case printing on foil. I can now see my effects, so you can see all those patterns. So very quickly, very easily, create the file, output it, and make a visual. And that really is all there is to pattern effects. So there are 20 different patterns in volume 1. Each pattern can be used 6 different ways. So if you can do it 6 different ways, and you can scale them, rotate them, and combine them together, then you can create some quite interesting things. So before we go, I just want to go back to the fact that we can actually create these different effects on top of each other. So I'm going to create just a basic file to go through this one again, and let's stick with that star that we had before. So I'm going to take that star, I'm going to give it a colour from the colour library, and let's do this as a gradient. Let's go with a yellow in the middle, and let's go with a red on the outside. Keep it quite summery. Let's take the frame off that. Okay, so from here, let's just make it a little bit nicer. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to duplicate the panel. I'm going to go onto here and let's choose one of our different patterns. So let's have this one. Okay, now I'm not really happy with the size of that pattern. It's a bit intricate for me, so I'm going to scale it. Transform it. There we go. That's looking a lot better. Let's make it about 250. There we go. Okay, so I've made my pattern. Now from here, if I wanted to then put an emboss on top of that, just duplicate the pattern, click it on the emboss, and it will keep the settings of what you had before. So now we have 3 different layers. We have an emboss, we have the metallic, and we have the CMYK. And then if you want to do some other interesting things, for example, maybe you want to put a frame around this, let's go to the frame. Now I don't want the embossing going right the way up to the edge, so I'm going to go to that spot colour, the emboss, switch it on, create my stroke by about, well, let's give it 10 point, I'm going to go to my stroke here. I'm going to put the stroke to the inside. I'm going to put the value of this stroke to 0 and put it to overprint. So now I've actually stopped the emboss going right to the edge, and you can do the same thing with the metallic one underneath. Let's hide that varnish layer or the emboss layer. We'll apply the same thing here. This time we're going to do that with the metallic separation, so we need the color logic one. We have 10 point, we had it on the inside. I'll put the value to 0 and set it to overprint. So that then pinches in the design. So now we have something a little bit more creative. So they're all really just design tools. How can you design with them? What can you do with them? It's down to you. You know, we could take this emboss one, we could maybe rotate it, and then we've got something even more interesting and creative going on. We've got metallic areas offset with embossing and different things to create something even more wacky. So it's really just down to the designer. What do you want to do? How do you want to apply it? So there we go. Have fun with these and good luck. And if you do something good with these tools, please do send print samples to us at ColorLogic. And you never know, we might be able to write a case study on you and promote your business for you. So looking forward to seeing what you can create, and good luck with the system.